You're listening to COB Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan.
What are we discussing today, Sudeep?
Hey Sharon, I'm discussing something that I'm really passionate about. I call it please measure whatever you treasure.
Ah, the poet in you is coming out already. So I love the topic. I think we are also, in a way, developing some kind of telepathy with all the episodes that we record because this is exactly what I was discussing with my business partner, Rishi, about how it is difficult to get businesses to track marketing performance.
Hmm.
And especially when we work with, say, emerging businesses, the newer businesses, we usually struggle for a takeoff point because there
Hmm.
is no real track of marketing performance measures for us to kind of say, evaluate a given status of the business. And we end up having to revert to Facebook and Google data, which is very, very limiting.
Hmm.
And we're obviously used to the broader information about how marketing is measured. So I'm glad you picked this topic. So what are we doing here? How do you work with this kind of situation, especially with newer businesses?
What I've observed with entrepreneurs and startup founders is that they operate with one of the two mindsets. The first are the ones who would like to measure everything that they do right there and then, and hence they tend to uh, turn towards lot more performance marketing campaigns which can give them measure in terms of sales. Then the other ones operate from a investment mindset, and therefore they are ready to invest behind long term initiatives, but they also operate with the mindset that these initiatives can't be measured in the short run, and hopefully they will give us results in the longer run. So these are the two mindsets that exist.
Uh huh.
And when I talk about measurement, and when I say please measure whatever you treasure, I'm talking to startup founders with both the mindsets. So the ones who are looking to measure via performance here and now are the ones who possibly need to think that just because they cannot measure some long term activities,
Mm-hmm.
they don't need to put all their money behind generating sales in a manner that brings customer to the website but does not give them reason enough
Hmm.
to keep coming back. So therefore they can invest behind activities which build the value of their brand, the image of the brand in consumers mind. On the other hand, the founders who are ready to invest but think that they cannot measure it now and here and now,
Right.
they should understand that there are sufficient number of ways and means to measure anything and everything you want to do about your brand.
Okay. So when you say long term, and this frame of reference kind of varies for every business. For FMCG, it could be a season. For tech, it could be even a matter of weeks.
Yeah,
So, what do you mean by long term? How does one say long term in my business?
actually very interesting question. And if you ask me, I think a lot of the confusion gets cleared when we define long run. Yeah. So when a startup founder say it will take me some time to articulate what benefit is accruing to my business in the long run, what he or she means is long run is the time needed to either create sufficient awareness about the product so that people come and buy it, or sufficient number of trials about the product, or the amount of time it will need to change the consumer behavior around the product or the category. So therefore they are waiting for that tipping point where they have achieved base level of behavior change or awareness such that they can then trust consumers repeat sense to kick in. Either ways, Regardless of whether you are waiting for awareness or trials or behavior change, the advice to everybody is whatever time period you are looking at, the fact is that the change starts now, even at a shorter scale. And hence, the measurement is possible now. You don't need to wait for that one season or weeks or years, etc., just to know whether what you have done is moving in the right direction or not.
Wow. Okay. So it means you're not defining long term in a span of time, but more in the marketing objective you're setting for yourself and the change you want to bring about in the consumer's attitude and behaviors towards your brand.
Yes,
It could be an immediate effect. It could take a few weeks. It could be to be any term. But the clearer you are on your marketing objective, the clearer you are in defining the time frame that you want to see this effect in.
correct, correct. So suppose, Sharon, let me give you an example.
Uh-huh.
Suppose you are operating in a category which is very well known, like a toothpaste, for example, and you launch a toothpaste which is extremely great tasting. Therefore, that is your point of difference. And hence, you might say that the tipping point for a consumer comes
Hmm.
when he or she tastes my toothpaste once. If that is the clarity in your head, that my marketing objective is to create sufficient trials
Hmm.
such that my consumer buys my product and then starts repeat purchase.
Right.
So, therefore, your prime objective is how do I create trial? Therefore, whatever you do as a marketing activity, you will measure how effectively is it pushing my consumer to create trial or not. And that measurement can start immediately.
Right, right, right. Whether my activity is working or not towards my marketing objective is what I can measure immediately.
Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. But I get what he's saying, and I would also put on sampling into this. There are obviously also a few marketing studies that go into this, but these are super expensive, right? Especially these surveys and these brand tracks that we run. I mean, you could hire two different brand managers for the same cost of running these surveys. So, how is this even feasible for us for a small size company or an emerging company?
Hmm. So let me answer that question by first putting a provocative statement.
Please,
Researching or measurement requires investment.
right?
Yeah. However, you might think that it is playing to what you asked me. It requires a lot of money and research agencies, etc. What I mean by investment, Sharon, is first investment of attention and mental capacity to decide what is your marketing objective. Number two, what metrics should I be measuring before triggering the activity and after triggering the activity, such that I am able to track whether my marketing objective is moving towards achievement or not.
Wow, wow.
The second investment, yeah,
Okay,
that's only first kind of investment. The second investment, honestly, is time investment.
right.
I have read about multiple case studies where the best kind of research
Mm-hmm.
has been done by the founders themselves by
Okay,
going and meeting consumers on their own.
okay.
Yeah, if you look at LinkedIn, you will find that there have been multiple times where country head of Uber or the country head of Ola
Hmm.
or companies of such kind
Hmm.
have been found doing taxi service or cab service on their own
Mm-hmm.
just because they wanted to meet the consumer in real life conditions. And what they intend to do is generate sufficient number of insights around consumer experience when the consumer is actually s- uh, you know availing their service, and also evaluate whether whatever marketing activities they are running at that moment, whether that is having any kind of impact on the consumer or not.
Okay, I mean, I have been considerably provoked now, not by the statement you first mentioned, but by the second. So I get that. I get the thought process being important for you to set your marketing objectives right. But these one-to-one interactions, right? I find them to be great PR exercises. I find the CEO coming in, driving the car, the Uber CEO, and even in India, I think he drove the car. And I think it makes for great PR exercise. And I'm not sure how much it really benefits the business because it is just not scalable. How many people can you meet? And doesn't, okay, I'm adding another question to this because market research requires a minimum sample size, right, for it to even be considered relevant. So, how does this one to one interaction help at all, especially by the CEOs and founders?
Okay. So I'll answer that question in three parts then, Charan. First part is where you said what is the credibility of this method of research and whether anybody has seen anything coming out of it. Yeah, is it just a PR exercise or is it really a value adding exercise? I will give you example of Mr. Darshan Patel of Winnie Cosmetics. This is the same company that created the brand Fog. The story goes that Darshan Patel, despite having significant amount of money in their bank after the sale of Paras, went and stood outside Kirana stores and observed a lot of youngsters buying deodorants from the store and the kind of questions they would ask and how they would judge what deodorant to buy.
Okay.
And then he would take time to talk to those youngsters and understand what are the current pain points of theirs from all the category players that are present in the market during that time. And using that, he was able to find out what are the category drivers and what is one pain point that nobody else in the category seems to be addressing. And that is how he came around with no gas, only Dio proposition.
And he stood in front of stores himself and spoke to
Yes,
consumers. And
yes.
consumers were willing to give him this time to for him to gather enough sample size.
See, if you stand in the store long enough, you actually become the shopkeeper. So, and the shopkeeper, most of these consumers are willing to talk to the shopkeeper.
Right.
Yeah, shopkeeper asks them questions very innocently and they would answer because they believe that the shopkeeper would assist their purchase decisions. As long as you are not intruding their shopper journey and you are assisting their purchase, they'll be happy to talk to you.
Right.
So that's the first part of the answer, which is about credibility of research of this kind. Second part of your answer was whether is it scalable or not. To that, Sharon, I would say that you frankly are not solving for scale. When we are talking to startup founders or entrepreneurs, what they need is some method which will create sufficient conviction in their minds and the minds of their marketing teams that what they are doing is the right step and is moving in the right direction, and that they are not investing behind activities which are probably going to prove useless in the long run. So, therefore, what they need is, suppose there are five people in the marketing team. If each one of them goes and meets five or six consumers on their own, you have met 25, 30 consumers amongst the whole marketing team. That is good enough as a sample set to create conviction in everybody's head and possibly give them an indication whether what they are doing is right or not.
Well, actually, makes sense. It's fair enough because I think I am approaching it more from habit in the sense of having to make a case for the seniors and the top management within the system. And
Yeah,
when you say founders are leading it themselves by
yeah,
one on one interaction, I mean, there's nobody above them after that. It's them
correct,
having to have the conviction with their team to drive this forward. I mean,
correct.
that's fair enough. Makes
And
sense.
one more bit around your third part of the answer where you said that isn't there a some kind of sample size for the research to become significant. So yes, from a quantitative research point of view, any sample set needs to be at least 30 units in number for it to be statistically significant. But what we are talking about here is not about generating quant samples for any study that you're doing.
Right.
You're talking about creating sufficient conviction.
Right.
You're listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands. Your hosts are Sudeep Chawla, marketing practitioner, business leader, and educator to advertising and marketing professionals, and Sharavana Raghavan of Vitril Innovations, consultants to consumer facing brands and businesses. For more information, go to corpcast.net. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling your friends and rating us.
Makes sense. But I have another curveball coming to you. Okay.
Okay.
Now, one-to-one interactions is great, but at the end of the day, Darshan Bhai is a veteran. He's built like multiple brands even before starting Vinny. So he knows the nuances. He knows how the market works. So doesn't it kind of, what do you say? It's very biased towards his expertise. How would a small business or a small business owner, an entrepreneur, be able to do something like what he did?
That's a fair question, actually, Sharon. And I think a lot of our listeners would also possibly want to ask the same question. Let me answer by trying take an example. Suppose you are selling a Nutri bar.
Okay.
Yeah, a bar that is nutritious, a granola bar of sorts. Yeah. So therefore, let's set up your marketing objective, your target segment, etc. So now, from a chocolate eater's point of view, suppose you segmented the market into two parts. So there are heavy chocolate eaters. Now these are the guys who are eating chocolates many times a week. So either you are talking to them and you are saying, okay, you eat chocolates quite a few times. Why don't you substitute one or two of those occasions with my Nutri bars? Or you're talking to actually healthy eaters, and healthy eaters are guys who are possibly not eating chocolate or eating very very infrequently. You're asking them to substitute one of their tasteless healthy eat occasions with a tasty option, that is a Nutri bar that you are offering. Yeah, so let's say you're talking to one of these two segments. Let's also assume, like many of our listeners would be, you are a D2C founder and you are selling this Nutri bar from your own website. Yeah, so therefore, you when you started this business, you announced it, you got some traffic on your website. So therefore, you have some base data as to what is the bounce rate of your home page or your lead generation page, what is your add to cart ratio, what is your abandonment ratio, etc. Those you already know. So therefore, you have a good idea that when you will drive any kind of traffic towards your website, what is the kind of purchase that you will get. So one of the choices that you have, Sharon, is that you drive traffic and then you let all of this follow, which is have a certain amount of bounce rate, have a certain amount of add to cart ratio, have a certain amount of cart abandonment ratio.
Right.
The second is every time you drive a campaign, you drive it in a manner such that the consumer stickiness of your brand goes up, and therefore your add to cart ratio goes up, card abandonment ratio goes down, yeah, while your website traffic is increasing. And that is how over a period of time you're creating a healthier funnel for your brand.
Right. Right. And this is where the brand salience bit comes in as well. Right.
Correct. So salience or any kind of brand building that you've done in consumers mind, now to do that, whatever you do will drive awareness. So any kind of awareness, whether you give 2 rupees off, 5 rupees off, or you do some kind of branded campaign, you brand your chocolate saying the best tasting Nutri bar out there, or taste that does not compromise on nutrition, or the other way around, nutrition that does not compromise on taste. Any of these propositions when you give out, you are creating a certain amount of imagery in consumers head, and all of these will drive traffic to your website. Now 5 rupees off will drive equal amount of traffic, maybe more, but it will do very less to improve your add to cart ratio over a period of time. However, if you have created a certain imagery in consumers' head, there is a distinct chance that you will be able to improve your add to cart ratio. And if the consumer finds your product living up to the expectation you created in their mind when you did your marketing campaign, you will find that your repeat ratio will become even better.
Right. 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 Right.
This is
Right.
where measurement comes in, Sharon. So when you suppose you want to run a certain campaign where you want to create an imagery in consumer's head,
Hmm.
what you can do is while you're running that campaign, before you even put it on air, you print it as a concept on a sheet of paper, go to few of your consumers who possibly could be your consumers, show it to them, ask them what do they make out of it. Does it create a positive enough imagery in their head such that their add to cart behavior will get prompted or not? Frankly, with every consumer, it will take you only 10-15 minutes, but you will spend about an hour or 2 hour preparing that concept before you go. So I spoke about investment of time,
Right.
and before that I said investment of mental capacity.
Correct.
So investment of mental capacity into creating that concept, investment of time of meeting certain number of consumers and making sure that you're meeting the right consumers who can give you the feedback whether your intended effect is getting created because of what you've said in that concept or not.
Right. So you first said the founders can actually replace something like the brand track or a certain campaign measure. Now you're actually going after the FGDs for concepts also. Our market research friends are going to be very upset because
Yeah.
they make a lot of money doing these concept studies. But I think what he's saying also makes sense, right? It's
So I'll tell you what, Sharon, in the last 5 years I have worked in segments where you're talking to people like contractors. Now typically many of these guys are not very amenable to traditional ways of doing research, and that has helped me strengthen this conviction
hmm.
that even if you don't rely on traditional research techniques, research agencies, etc., but you are able to choose the right set of people to talk to, and if you go to them with the right set of stimulus, you will be able to get excellent responses out of them, which will guide your conviction and will make sure that you are making the right decisions.
I think that's very simple yet very, very clear articulation from your end. I think this is awesome that you even picked the source of business. When you say you're going after a chocolate consumer or a tasteless Nutribar, kind of makes your marketing objective so clear that actually gives you a very pointed direction for your measure of the metric. Now, that's all said, but both of us have been brand managers in the past, right? So we know how sorry lives these brand managers lead. Now, why would you load them with so much more work? They not just have to write the concept, but carry around the concept from store to store, talking to consumers. How are they ever going to have the time to do this?
Hmm. So, Sharon, let me remind you, I never said the word brand manager, you did.
Fair
I
enough.
have only been mentioning startup founders and entrepreneurs because I think that is where the responsibility lies. It is the senior leadership team, the founders, who have to showcase this kind of consumer obsession by making sure that they meet the consumers and test out the efficacy of anything that they are going to trigger. Because in the kind of setups that we are talking to, you don't have the luxury of a brand manager strengthening their conviction, then talking to his or her senior, and then convincing the founder and the rest of the team to invest behind the initiative. The consumer obsession, the consumer clarity has to be driven by the leadership team, and hence that is the kind of culture you want each startup founder to create in their organization. Because if they are not obsessed about the consumer, then I'm not sure how they are really creating meaning.
Fair enough. I think I get the point. This might not be the most pristine way, but when you're that passionate and driven to build a brand for your consumers, you've got to find workarounds. And I think all that you mentioned are pretty clear a way forward because that's pretty much served the purpose, even in the long run.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I have 100% conviction behind it.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm just going to pick your brain on one more topic here to say
Yep.
I get the conversation about the qual and the qual part of this analysis. What if we could discuss about the same for quant? How relevant is quant for a startup? A quantitative research in the startup world.
I would possibly say that it starts becoming relevant once you have a sizable number of consumers buying and sampling your product. At the very early stage, I don't think it makes sense at all. At that time, you are actually creating surrogates and you're doing estimations for market as well as addressable market, etc., the TAM estimates. And at that point in time, when you're choosing your consumer proposition, what to say, so you're going after a broad segment of market with your chosen growth behavior. It is only after you've reached a certain stage and you have sizable choices to make, where you want to say, okay, should I go after this or should I go after that, and you want to really size up what is the kind of ROI you will get behind both. That is where your quant research, etc., starts coming in. Honestly, if you ask me, if you are very clear about your brand objectives and you also clear about what growth behavior you are chasing to reach those brand objective, then you might have 3 or 4 ways of triggering that growth behavior. In today's day and age, with most of the brands that we are talking about which are digital first brands, there are very very inexpensive ways of testing those 3 or 4 propositions, 3 or 4 marketing methods online, by just putting out the concept and seeing what is the kind of click through rate that you're getting. That gives you your first cut quant feedback. And then if you want to further refine your articulation, you pick up the one that wins in the highest CTR and then go to the consumer and talk to them qualitatively.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think I get the point, right? So until your business is of a considerable size, you don't necessarily need that depth of a quant exercise, because the quant anyway tells you only what. Never helps you answer the why. And you
Yes.
might as well go directly to the consumer to figure out the why of it. Awesome. Awesome. I think that's brilliant, Sudeep. I think this is where your forte of simplifying complex things comes to the fore. And I think while I understand every bit you said, the articulation of it gives me so much clarity. So I'm just going to sum up what we've discussed here today. Okay.
Sure.
If you want to impact a certain consumer behavior with your brand or attitude towards your brand, and that becomes your frame of reference for time, and that sets your marketing objective, and that would influence how you measure the certain activity that you're doing to change this consumer behavior. And it's not just about being able to measure it, but you must measure it, because if you want to replicate the success or even avoid the failures, you need to measure everything that is important in your brand's journey. And not all these brand metrics have to be elaborate exercises or expensive ones. Even one-to-one interactions, like you demonstrated, works very well to get directional idea or directional feedback about where your brand is going, and that's good enough for you to take action. And it's more about the investment of time and the effort to put together the thinking to get the right answers out of consumers or the best answers out of consumers than about the tools you use. It's more the intent versus the tools. And it is, and this kind of an activity is not necessarily pristine, but it does give you a great way forward, and therefore has to be championed by the leadership or the founders for it to have a longevity within the system. And any brand metric is good only for as long as it can survive within the system. And the last point about quant, say, a business at its early stages does not necessarily have to look at quant for a long time. You can get by very comfortably and grow pretty progressively by just focusing on the qual feedback you get on your brand.
Correct.
Wow. Okay. How was that summary? Capture everything?
Yes, it does. It certainly does. Thank you very much for that, Sharon.
Thank you for listening to COB, Conversations on the Business of Brands with Sudeep Chawla and Sharavana Raghavan. Subscribe and learn more at cobcast.net. That's COBBCAST.net.